What's going on, everybody? I'm here today to talk about which Israel Adesanya I think is going to show up at this Saturday's UFC 305. Now, in September 2023, Adesanya was scheduled to defend his middleweight title against Sean Strickland. Heading into that matchup, Adesanya was a massive betting favorite because he was widely considered one of the greatest middleweights of all time, probably number two after Anderson Silva. But Adesanya was on his way to taking over that role and being considered number one. Meanwhile, Strickland was taking the fight because Dricus du Plessis was supposed to be the number one contender, couldn't fight on that date because of an injury, and Strickland stepped in to ensure that Adesanya could defend his title in Australia where he represents. Now, the results of that fight is not what 99% of the world thought was going to happen. Sean Strickland simply outstruck Adesanya for 5 rounds, knocked him down early, and then secured the shocking unanimous decision win. Now, I think there's a couple different ways to look at that performance. At first, you don't want to underestimate what Sean Strickland did that night. The way he was able to execute his jab, his striking defense to confuse Adesanya was worthy of becoming the UFC champion that night. He was the better fighter. But I don't think that we saw the Israel Adesanya we are used to. The Israel Adesanya that knocked out Robert Whittaker. The Israel Adesanya that knocked out Alex Pereira. And the main thing I will say to back that up so it's not just an empty statement is once the fight progressed, Adesanya knew that he was losing the fight. He had to. His corner was telling him. They knew they were losing, and he didn't really throw any caution to the wind. Come round 4 and 5, he just didn't go out on his shield the way that you kind of thought that he would, or at least just throw more caution in the wind and try to make something happen, because anybody that's willing to strike with Israel Adesanya has suffered the consequences, other than Alex Pereira, the one fight. Fair enough, but I think we can all agree that at this point, in hindsight, Alex Pereira was on a different level. Anyway, so if you don't want to go just based on fundamentals, which I do question, I think that there was one of two reasons that Adesanya lost that fight. Number one could have been that he was overworked, exhausted. His body was just breaking down on him. The guy had defended his title, and well, he lost one against Pereira, but he had fought 4 title fights in a 14-month span, including 2 against Alex Pereira, which were arguably the most emotional of his career because of their history. Now, heading into that matchup against Strickland, I don't think that it's possible, for being number 2, that he could have been as motivated to fight Sean Strickland as he was against Alex Pereira, or as he was when he became the UFC champion. He was working his way up. I think he just thought that he was going to be able to outstrike him. It was going to be somewhat of an easy night in the office, and he would retain his throne. So, regardless of the reasoning, Sean Strickland did get the win. And now we haven't seen Adesanya since that performance. So we have to evaluate what happened on that night against Strickland to decide what we think could happen at this Saturday's UFC 305 against Dricus du Plessis. Now, number one, he's taken an extended break, has not fought for almost a year. Let all these little injuries heal up, take some time away, go on vacation, be with his family. And number two, there's no doubt he's going to be motivated for this fight. First off, he wants to regain his title. Second off, he has an intense rivalry with Dricus du Plessis for a number of reasons. And so we know that both of those things that could have been a factor in the Sean Strickland fight are going to be covered at UFC 305. And this is a good test for Adesanya to really see where he's at now. Because Dricus du Plessis, he's 7-0 in the UFC, 5 by finish, beat Robert Whittaker, beat Sean Strickland, so that's 2 former world champions. And he is as confident as ever. But I do think that he's very beatable for Adesanya. We saw the way that even though Du Plessis beat Strickland, the way that Strickland was able to find the target and really cause some severe damage on Strickland's face. If Strickland can do that, and I know that it's different style than Adesanya, but Adesanya has the power to put Du Plessis lights out. So here is the final questions. Is Adesanya unmotivated permanently in his fighting career because he's reached a point of fame, fortune, satisfaction in his life where he doesn't have that extra edge that's needed in these world title fights against some of the best middleweights in the world? And is he trying to find that motivation by furthering this rivalry with Dricus Du Plessis? Or is this completely being blown out of proportion? Did Sean Strickland simply just have the better game plan that night? Was the better fighter in general, just one of those styles make fights? Strickland will always be able to beat Adesanya. And Adesanya, maybe he doesn't need the motivation that I'm talking about, and he actually does hate Dricus Du Plessis. At the end of the day, my prediction is going to be an Israel Adesanya knockout. I think that the lack of motivation and the overworking of his body were the main reasons we didn't see him show up against Sean Strickland. He's fixed those problems. He's going to come out there in front of his home crowd of Australia, put on another vintage Adesanya performance, and leave this weekend's pay-per-view event as the UFC middleweight champion.